Thank you, everyone, for coming back and joining us for our second panel. It's a very important panel. I think the palm oil sector is a very critical piece of the pie when we're talking about the general sustainable resource sector, and specifically within this region as well, as you will hear from our panel, no doubt. Now, as you could tell from the rather lengthy introduction that Ricardo just did, we have a very full panel here with us today. And I think one of the hallmarks of the SWR that we try to have each year is to have voices from really across all the different sectors, cutting through all the stakeholders within the industry. And I think we're very, very honored to have with us people from very, very different experiences and backgrounds, and also from different parts of the world. And we will certainly benefit from, I think, hearing from their experiences, and hopefully a very dynamic dialogue as we go along as well. Bearing in mind, we are also trying to keep to time, so we will try to move this discussion on as speedily as possible. I've spoken to some of our panelists, and they've agreed that they will definitely try to keep to time and answer quickly, but succinctly as well. I think the actual issues that we will be discussing pertain to the many of the issues that affect regulators, financiers, producers, traders, buyers, and end consumers. And hopefully we will explore the role that every actor has to play in terms of greening the palm oil supply chain. There are many new initiatives that have been coming up to promote sustainable palm oil in recent years, but we do still face considerable challenges, which I'm sure we will talk about as we go along. Without trying to take up too much time, perhaps I could throw the floor, or we'll give the floor over to our first speaker, Dr. Petra Meekers, who's Director of CSR and Sustainable Development at Musim. Musim, headquartered in Singapore, but having operations across the entire palm oil supply chain, is a critical member of the sector. And I'll leave it to Petra to share a bit more about your experiences.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I think what you say, keep it short and sharp. Nowadays, as players in this industry, and if we look at Musim, we are fully integrated, so you start from having a plantation operation, all the way to your refining, all the way to your trading, all the way to your logistics. You link from where you produce something nowadays straight away to your consumers that are using it in any form of products. And as we all know, the supply chain is can be quite long, but also palm oil in itself comes in very different shapes and forms in a lot of different products. So if we take back where we started, and particularly when we started to talk about sustainability, more or less in this industry, when the Roundtable of Sustainable Palm Oil also started, which was, in the early 2003, 2004, Musim was already on board with that debate. We were one of the first Indonesian companies that was joining it. Our CEO was personally sitting on the boards of the RSPO and went through that process on what are we going to do, what kind of standard can we shape and form to work as an industry, and with all the partners in there to look at certification as a model, a standard as a model. And by doing that, I think a lot of different companies, all our colleagues in the industry have gone, the bigger players have gone through that same process. We all joined the RSPO, we went for certification, and you looked at the models of how you could integrate the different players. Now, that was one initiative, and that's of course a multi-stakeholder initiative. That is not an initiative, that is for the players, it's voluntary, you can choose to be part of that. And where I think that debate started to link to as well was of course the different government settings. And I think what you see there, it's an important space to look at on how voluntary standards can link to regulatory frameworks. And if you look at Malaysia, I think the gentleman on the right can tell a bit more about it, and Indonesia, they started also with their own schemes, linking to what sustainable production should look like from a regulatory perspective as well. So I think that interlink is now happening, but definitely what we see as a challenge is how we find, you can do your own things on your own plantations, you can do a complete certified supply chain, bring in the smallholders that directly link to you in that supply chain, certify them as well. But if you look at Musim, we started to say in November 2014, we need to look also at our third-party supply chain. That third-party supply chain can be a mixture of things. It can be certified companies, but we also link to a lot of independent mills, independent smallholders, different growers that sit differently in this setting and in this debate. And that was where you also saw the discussion coming up for zero deforestation, no development on peat, and involvement also of the social indicators as land rights, as decent wages. So that's sort of third-party policies that have been set up, and that is, for instance, also linking to an initiative called the Indonesian Palm Oil Pledge, and where we as producers are linking to on the platform, trying to see what we do in that space. How do we link all these players in that space to particular standards that we want to implement? And that's not been easy. I think finding all the time, you can find a mill that supplies you the particular CPO, what we call crude palm oil, but how do you find then directly the third-party supplies to that particular mill? And I think that is where we're sitting in that space, all of us, trying to figure out where we find all the players that are part of that land, that produce on that particular piece of land, and how we interlink with each other. So I think from our Musim perspective, we have said we are tracing back as a first level to the mills, and the second level is back to the plantations. And that is where, in that space where we are sitting, we have confirmed, we launched now our, it's called a dashboard, where you can see what you are doing on in the traceability setting, showed all the mills that we are purchasing from. But now it goes further, and that going further, we can see that the complications kicking in. We have seen, I think it was Front News today, the report that was launched on particular national park, Costesenilo. The lady before us already asked a question on that. There are complications in there, and we need to figure out what we are going to do in the long run in extending it, extending sustainable practice in this industry.
Thank you very much. Thank you as well to keeping to time. But I think within the slightly compressed time, you've managed to highlight some of the key challenges that we're facing. And we've, in fact, just in the past couple of days, we're hearing more and more reports of suppliers, third-party suppliers, generating some issues in terms of traceability, accountability for the bigger companies out there as well. I'll turn now to Dr. Makhdzir to share with us the perspective as CEO of the Malaysian Palm Oil Association. Now, MPOA is an industry lobby group and acts as an umbrella entity to consolidate associations. It's been working since 1999 and has the support of the government. In terms of ensuring long-term profitability and growth of the industry, but also facing the current environment as Dr. Meekers has highlighted, what are some of the perspectives from the association's point of view?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, panel speakers, ladies and gentlemen. There are a lot of challenges that we went through. Number one, the figment of their imagination, what do you mean by sustainability is not an easy to understand by many. And what more, we have 166 plantation companies having about more than 300 estate plantations, having the hectareage of about almost 2 million hectares. We planted about 5.42 million hectares. So you imagine 1.9 million hectares is as big as the state of Johor of plantation become our members. But we have Petra and Malacca, which is not our members. So we comprise about 35%. What I mean by the differences is that the understanding is in the initial part was from the big plantation being integrated, some of them are vertically integrated, is easy to understand. But for the smallholders, it's a challenge. Now, if you ask them to do something to comply, they will ask, what is it in it for us? That's the immediate thing. But the recent event of as regular as the haze in the region for the past 3-4 years, that has struck a chord of awareness about them that there's something to do with the environment, that we need to do something. Now, if Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand produces 91% of the world's CPO, I think we have to have our act together now. We have to work on it, and because the haze is a common factor is the climate change as the realities that we need to do something. We don't have to wait for the rest of the world to tell us what to do, but I think we are experiencing it. Now, number one that we have is that for the big plantation, when we formed this association MPOA way back in year 2000, at that time, it was the agglomeration of the rubber growers, cocoa growers, oil palm, and many other big plantations. And easy for them to understand and participate. So MPOA become the founding member of RSPO way back in 2005. But by 2010, after almost more than 5 years, and actually about 10 years in the formation, Malaysia started to form the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil. So why it was formed? Simply because when we get into that situation, we understand that whether government or private sector, whatever that is, there's a limit that they can do. The whole one end to the other end of the spectrum, these are far-flung stakeholders. Their understanding is nuanced by their experience in that sense. And that is not easy to manage. But we see now that the haze has struck a common chord that we need to do something about it. And I think it's good that 91% of the world CPO producer, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand, do something. And I really applaud the move in Singapore down here to call this meeting. And what we see in the future is that very much the regulations, the nuts and bolts of the sustainability on the principle. Of late, we are quite happy because as of December 12, the COP21 was signed by more than 190 countries. To me, it's a feat, not easy to achieve. But what we should do now, look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17, how to extract the principles, criteria, indicators based on those SDG. And I think that would be the next challenge for us to embrace that, because it is being signed being initiated by United Nations. So I think that would become a good reference point. Otherwise, it has been like if some organization, based on the experience, they may want conservation. But we look at the definition of sustainability. Meeting the current societal need without sacrificing the needs of the future generations. That element is the inclusive fitness of the needs to embrace all elements. It cannot be done by one stakeholders, number one. Secondly, the intergenerational care for the next generation. So we have to look at the life cycle of palm oil, which is 25 years. And then, other than that, we have to look into possibly new realities, that the conservation that is more environmental, that not to break the capacity, destroy the capacity of the future generation. So we need to define oil palm sustainability. And I like the approach on this supply chain, because all stakeholders from one end of the spectrum to the end are involved in decision making. They can contribute their ideas. It may be nuanced by their experience, but nevertheless, it's very important that everybody sit at the table, come up with their experience and share, and then we come up with the commonality that we have to do something. Maybe I stop here for the moment.
Thank you very much. And I have to say that we certainly agree with your observation that every stakeholder has a role to play. And that's one of the reasons why we've convened the SWR for 3 years. Much more so than just to have a talk shop and just to exchange opinions. Is really trying to understand the experiences and backgrounds from all the different stakeholders before we can talk effectively about any kind of sustainable solution. And on that note, maybe I'll turn now to Mr. Hervé Simon, who is the Group Marketing Director at Ayam brand. Ayam brand is quite ubiquitous here in Singapore, and I'm sure many of us know the products. It is a company that produces products across a very broad range. But Ayam brand also has a palm oil policy. It is a member of the Sustainable National Alliance for Sustainable Palm Oil, initiated here in Singapore. And perhaps you could share with us some of the experiences from a commercial point of view, from a company like Ayam brand, in terms of addressing some of the challenges that we've already sort of started talking about so far.
Okay, so I guess that I've been invited to share our journey to sustainable supply chain, and just to show that, in fact, sustainable supply chain is not only for big international company, and you can be a medium-sized company and have quite extensive policy about it. In fact, Ayam was established in 1892, and we are very much in natural product with short ingredient list, non-GMO, no preservative, no added MSG. And then we are not using, to tell you the truth, a lot of quantity of palm oil, only 200 metric tons per year. And so we didn't feel really concerned by palm oil problem and everything. And a few years ago, we were contacted by a small Australian NGO, because on our website you have a button called Talk to the Boss. It's not a joke. So if you put an email or talk to the boss, you will talk to the boss. So, and this organization say, why your palm oil is not certified? And they say, there is no reason for us to be certified. We are in our factory is in West Malaysia, so the problem is not from there really. And we have a very small quantity to be used, only 200 metric tons. And this lady say, it's not a good answer. And we talk among the director and we say, yes, it's not a good answer, she's right. So why we don't study the RSPO certified sustainable palm oil? And we find out it was possible for a product. And so the first thing, so when you decide that, you say, okay, you ask the factory and say, so now you will buy only sustainable palm oil. And what is the reply of factory? Usually it's not possible. So why is not possible? Because we are using so low quantity. You have to buy a full truck, and then is easier for us because we buy from a local producer, so we just buy exactly what we need for production. And at the end, in fact, it was very easy to solve. You just need to build a dedicated tank. So it was an investment of 50,000 ringgit, so not even the cost of a car in Malaysia. So we say you need to have a strong management decision to say, yes, we have to do it, so we invest in that. And within a few months, in fact, the whole palm oil we are using was sustainable. In the same time, we took a stand and we say, also we have to be transparent. Each time a product, an Ayam brand product, have palm oil, it has to be clear on the label, it should be written palm oil. So like that also, consumer are fully aware. And in fact, when you have this kind of positive attitude, you get rewards. And I can tell you that already we get several rewards, so I can share with you what are the rewards. The first reward is that if you go on Australian website, for instance, Australia is a big market for us, and you will find Ayam brand and ethical food. So there is some website in Australia who list the products which are ethical, or the brand which are ethical, and we find out that, for instance, Ayam brand in Australia, in this website, are listed ethical food, so we are classified A or B, and our main competitor, are classified F. So, and it can seem an anecdote, a small story, but in fact it's very important with the relationship with Woolworths, Coles, which are the local NTUC. So it's very important with the relationship with our distributor, retailers, to be considered like sustainable and ethical brands. And the second reward we get, we take this decision a few years ago, but then last year everybody know about the big A's we had. And what happened that one morning we receive a fax from NTUC and cold storage. It says that during the day you have to give us all the list of a product of palm oil, and you have to tell us where the palm oil come from. And within a few minutes we were able to reply to NTUC cold storage that in fact we on 100 products we are distributing with NTUC, we only have 5 with palm oil, and it was all certified palm oil. We are able to fax immediately all the certification, and they were very happy, and they said, oh, they were very surprised. We didn't know that you get such a policy. It gave us the idea, in fact, to advertise it on our website, because before we didn't even care to advertise it on the website. And so we find out that ethical ethical solution, sustainable supply chain, in fact, it makes your business model stronger and more solid for the future. So it can seem like an effort to be done. You go out of your comfort zone, but then you will find the reward in the future. And recently, we have been contacted also by WWF. They are in the initiative of creating national alliance for sustainable palm oil. In fact, the idea is to gather together company to encourage them to go for sustainable palm oil. I think it's a very good idea, and Ayam, in fact, joined this alliance with the idea that we can be the example for the small and medium company, which don't have a big sustainability team, but I think it's important, and I would say that everybody needs, in fact, to have an example and to have some people to advise you. Even us, recently we joined Singapore chapter of United Nations Global Compact, and we didn't know how to do because we are not Unilever, we are not Danone, and so we take the advice of Cerebos, you know, Essential Chicken, which have done a great job on sustainability and CSR, and so they share with us information. So as far as palm oil is concerned, we are willing to share also with small and medium company and to explain to them how to do and how it is possible to start this journey to sustainability on the dot.
Thank you very much. I have to say this panel is very disciplined. Everybody's keeping to time. Thank you so much. I think our next speaker, Ms. Isabella Low, who's chairman of the Singapore Environment Council, will be able to build on the topic that Hervé has sort of explored in terms of the perspective of the consumer group producer. Our earlier speaker has already touched on the fact that SEC is leading the charge in terms of green label certification and doing some very good work there internationally, as well as other new initiatives in terms of certifying palm oil products. So we've heard from Hervé about how this can have an impact on a consumer goods producing company. Ms. Low, maybe you could share with us the role of stakeholders like consumers in addressing these issues that we're looking at today.
Thank you. I think I will just first start off with people who may not know who SEC is, that we've been around for 21 years now in Singapore as an Environment Council. And our NGO is slightly different from a lot of the other NGOs. We actually frame difficult issues that the layman can understand. So like meaning of sustainability, climate change, and recycling, upcycling, it goes to the whole gamut of international language that we use right now in empowering people. And so we do this through many experiential routes. Of course, educating public is obviously one of them, but advocacy through green consumerism and providing greener options for multi-partnerships between consumers, people, industries, and even volunteer groups. So we're kind of like a versatile NGO, and I would say, to put it very bluntly, we're the playmaker for the environment. I mean, this is a football term, playmaker. We operate like a number 10 jersey in football. We cut through complexities, and we find resolve with all the multi-stakeholders. We place the ball where the consumers and the industries and the governments can take focus, take action. And of course, through the prolonged haze last year, it was only natural for us to partner with CASE, which is the Consumer Association of Singapore, which represents the voice of consumers. And advocating green procurement we did through the consumer voice, of course, and that wider reach went not just through Singapore, but globally and internationally through CASE, all right? So we galvanized these actions, as you had heard before. Last year, sometime in October, the galvanization was actually through active discussions with the supermarket chain, with the Singapore Manufacturing Federation, even the Hotel Association, and even smaller groups all joined in to pledge for green procurement. So taking down the tissue products was one hell of a, what we call a milestone that we've achieved. But of course, you may say that's only for Singapore, but it had a knock-on effect globally as it resonated through every procurement channel there was in the whole region that asked the pertinent question, are we actually the ones that contributed to buying these haze-stricken products? Are we responsible? So again, if I can just bring back to where we are, we've actually taken memberships internationally right now with RSPO, as well as the Forest Stewardship Council. And we are clearly now being accepted in our membership as an integral playmaker in the complexities of compliance, as we're now discussing in this forum, through consumers, to the manufacturers, through the entire supply chain and organizations that are playing out right now. So as we are now moving on to stronger advocacy, the SGLS, we call it the Singapore Green Labeling System, is a crucial element, a crucial enabler for us to provide more greener consumerism and the purpose of it to measure impact. But I must put it very bluntly here, we're not here to impair businesses, neither are we to say that we're going to create more costs for doing business. Starting actually this coming Q3, Q4, we're going to work very closely with upstream activities, together with also WWF, with the Alliance. We're looking at upstream traceability or sustainability with the RSPO voice and maybe through the MPSO. Complementing this will be a very pragmatic approach that we're going to look at in terms of representing the people's interests in auditing compliance, auditing sustainability, and all these nice language, so that we can say and we can focus on stern actions that can be taken in future if they're in terms of green procurement. I think I've kept to my time, Nicholas, so I just step off and thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much. I realize that questions are already starting to flood in for the specific speakers. So, Ms. Low, you definitely have some questions coming in. For those of you who would like to submit them on your conference app, please carry on doing so as well. We have our final speaker, and we're very honored to have with us Mr. Bian Zhenhu, who is President of the China Chamber of Commerce of Foodstuffs and Native Produce, as well as Animal Byproducts. I guarantee you that's far easier to say in Mandarin than it is in English. The CFNA, which we conveniently shorten it to, was established in 1988 with the aims of protecting interests and rights of member companies in agriculture, forestry, and food and farm products industries. And it's given China's growth, critical role in the global economy, not just in Asia, the status of CSPO consumption in China is something that is of great interest to a lot of us in the region. Where is it concentrated? Is it more the issue of government or commercial companies or households? So we certainly look forward to hearing from Mr. Bian, who is joining us here from Beijing today. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very glad to be the last one speech. I know, you know, there are much high-level dialogues, including this dialogue in Singapore. I wish this dialogue complete success. Palm oil is one of the most important vegetable oils in China. In 2015, China imported 4.31 million tons palm oil, ranking third after India and EU. This number accounted for 19% of China's total valuable vegetable oil consumption. It is expected that Chinese palm oil trade will reach 8 million tons in 2020. Hence, the promoting of palm oil sustainability is vital to the stability and the safety to China. According to the development of China's 13th five-year plan, China is now developing in a more sustainable way. CFNA, in my chamber, tries to advocate the concept of sustainability to every member. I'd like to introduce the twice guides about palm oil. And the FGMC program, CFNA, is now leading a project that to develop guides. The guide 1, guide for overseas investment and the production of sustainable palm oil by Chinese enterprises, and the guide 2, guide for promoting trade and the consumption of sustainable palm oil in China. The China-UK collaboration on international forest investment and trade program is an initiative between China's State Forestry Administration, the Ministry of Commerce. I am former officials of MOFCOM and the UK Department for International Development. It is part of a global program, forest governance, markets, and climate, and component and the INFIT program is the development and application of guides, the overseas investment and production of sustainable palm oil by Chinese enterprises. The implementing party of the palm oil component is CFNA. Significant progress has been made by the technical team headed by CFNA to produce the guide for overseas investment and the production of sustainable palm oil by Chinese enterprises. Version 3.0 of the production guides was discussed at the 13th Roundtable meeting in November last year. In Kuala Lumpur, an online public consultation on the draft document was conducted during December last year. The draft guide was field tested by the technical team on the Chinese investment in Kalimantan, Indonesia in last March. Results of the field testing and the comments recommendations for the stakeholders consultation will be taken into consideration when production the final version of the guide for investment and production. This is a voluntary guide with the overall objective of providing guidance to Chinese enterprises which are planning or are engaged in overseas investment and the production of sustainable palm. As you know, palm oil is the major vegetable oil that is consumed in China. We continually take a great portion among consumption structure in the foreseeable future. ASEAN is also the first region to sign the implement of the MOU of FTA with China, and the favorable business environment like this, ASEAN countries such as Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia, is particular, will see a steady and increasing palm oil import from China, and CFNA will continue to strive to play an important role in expanding the multilateral trade and committed to raise awareness towards the importance of palm oil sustainability from all stakeholders and end consumers. Mentioning high level of trade in import and export is crucial to palm oil's greening process. Currently, some Chinese enterprises knowledge that the producing, importing, and utilizing the sustainable palm oil will benefit them in building international image. Well, they may take extra risks if they operate in an unsustainable way. CFNA will leverage its influence and monitoring functions in the agricultural market to further encourage enterprises to apply to the concept sustainability into practice. I'm sorry, I shall introduce some idea about my chamber. CFNA is one of the biggest agricultural organizations in China, with more than 8,000 members. Every year, we hold the China International Oil and Oilseeds Industrial Summit. During the summit, there is a sustainable sub-conference, which is co-organized by CFNA and RSPO and other partners, including the WWF, COFCO, Musim, and so on. I hereby extend my invitation to all of you and looking forward to your participation in this time, a later time held in the Sichuan province, the Panda's hometown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have kept largely to time, so I'm very glad to say that we have about 20 to 25 minutes for questions. I've got a good range of questions here on my iPad as well through the conference app. And I think as we accelerate through towards the later part of the Q&A, I'll start to take questions in bunches and throw them open to the panel. If you have specific questions, I see people have been addressing questions to specific panelists, that's great as well. If anybody would like to put up a hand and ask a question verbally, we'll take that as well. I see Gurmit sitting around the back. But before we go to Gurmit, can I pose a general question? And this is from Ms. Yasmin Rashid, who's sent in this question twice, so I presume she really wants it to be answered. But I think it's a good question to warm us up as well. And it's this idea about how much will be enough and how much is too much when it comes to using land for palm oil. I think we know the benefits of palm oil. There is the general acceptance that it can be more sustainable or more efficient use of land compared to other products. But would we want to consider an issue of putting a moratorium on further and future land expansion in terms of using it for palm oil? Maybe in countries like Malaysia, Dr. Makhdzir, I will throw it to you, but it is a question for everyone, and maybe Hervé, from your perspective as a consumer product company as well. But let's start.
Thank you for the question. Yes, let me put it this way. To produce 1 hectare from CPO from palm oil, it takes 8 times more land for soybean or rapeseed or other than the high biomass in palm oil is benefit there. Now, your question about whether it is enough or not is always pro and cons to it. But put it this way, like I'm looking at the numbers here. Now we have about 680 million ASEAN people. By 2050, it will be 1.3 billion. By 2025, China will have more than 400 million of middle income bracket. They will change that. There will be a change in the pattern in their diet. Now, the question on whether it's enough or not it depends. So, for instance, in Malaysia last year, we have an excess stockpile about maybe 2.5 million. So now we enforce the B10 biofuel. Indonesia is going to bio B15. Now, Indonesia is quite interesting because it has a 35%, about more than 30% of domestic consumption. And Malaysia is being export-led because 90% of our palm oil are being exported. So if we look at in terms of the food needs and also looking at the renewable energy needs, I think we have to strike the balance. But what is interesting is that what we want to see is that ASEAN as a whole, and immediately for India and China, for Malaysia, 35% of their palm oil are being consumed by China, India. I think with the MSPO, we now just have 8 rounds of discussion with Indonesia on the ISPO. We want to harmonize between the MSPO and ISPO at the Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries. So we had 8 rounds already. We need to rationalize and reconcile or harmonize the standards. And this is the question. But what is lacking at the moment is that there is very few science-based or hard facts criteria standards. And that will somehow curtail operation. And you could see that the effect is already on the ground there. As the last 2 years, the buying of land is more on brown fields rather than green fields, like buying the Papua New Guinea, the Eagle High, and the bad lessons about in Liberia lessons, then the green field, it fails. So these are, I would say, market forces operating along the line that is delimiting the production.
Well, I cannot say I have real insight in this matter. I would see that, in fact, it's true that we have a growing population, and so we will face increasing needs of foodstuff, whatever it is, and in the same time, we need also a diversity. So in food, so I think every nutritionist will recommend to have a diversity of food. So you need different oil. You need different food profile to gather the population with a lot of various nutrients. I think also that some oil in Asia, you have some interesting oil like coconut oil, which is very trendy right now for the nutritional benefit. So, but me, I've been living 11 years in Kuala Lumpur, and I'm the feeling now also that another problem could happen also that, in fact, with all these big cities, in fact, a field has transformed more and more into cities and big urban area. It could be also a problem in providing foodstuff for people. So all the land taken by the urbanization.
Thank you. I have a question for Dr. Petra from Faisal Parish. He references a comment that you made about challenges in ensuring policies are actually followed throughout the supply chain. He would like to know how the experience of the company has been in terms of addressing this or trying to overcome these challenges.
So far, we have seen quite a mixed response. I think we have seen players where we have to engage, or we engage with, that are where we can talk around. Indeed, I mean, the other topic, of course, is what is the land use planning on a particular concession? What can and can't be done? How do we view it with the policy as well? But we have had also quite some not so engaged responses, to the extent of saying, stay out of our business. If you don't want to buy, then don't buy. So I think very simple. We see. I think it's at the moment a sort of 50-50. We see a very progressive engagement, but we also see on the other hand an engagement whereby it is clearly stated that this is our land, we plan our land, we run our land, we do our own production, it is our title, we have a legal title, and therefore we do right now the way we want to run the operation. So a bit of a mixed engagement, and I think that is also where we have to find, I guess, or find ways to engage more on local levels in bigger stakeholder platforms. I think we can't do it as a one-to-one continuously. I think we have to try to see how we can link with different stakeholders in, they call it a landscape approach, but I do believe that these are the platforms that can create dialogues with partners that now might not see the dialogue from a one-to-one as an engagement.
I have one more question that I'll pose to both Ms. Low as well as Mr. Bian. It's a composite question from Dr. Ping Hua and a few others who has also asked this. It's basically, what can we do to encourage different markets in different countries to only use sustainable palm oil? There's a question for China as well as what can the SEC do to encourage the use of this among SMEs and food outlets in Singapore, which hopefully will then make the overall adoption of sustainable palm oil a national, almost a national, nationwide type of move. Maybe I'll start with Ms. Low.
Okay. I just don't want to lose too much thought on the last discussion that you had. That was very good. Actually, one of the things that we don't have someone here as an expert is this growth in the use of palm oil being diverted as a biofuel. Now, that is a whole new discussion. And again, I'm not going to say more than that someone needs to ask the hard question whether that palm oil needs to be diverted to biofuels when there's so many other technologies and other alternatives out there. So I'll just address the first thing, which is around sustainability, traceability, which is the hardest to achieve, and I'm sure some of my colleagues here would understand that. Just to provide a simple supply chain chart would be impossible to understand how that works. But more importantly for advocacy for us, the labeling is very important, as was put very bluntly by the gentleman who had asked the question. At the receiving end, in the finished product end, we just launched this green label recently for finished product, and it is going to be a hard slog. For one thing, at the finished product end, we're talking about 1-2% maybe in a lipstick of palm oil traces, or maybe 5% or so. And even for that matter, by the time they're blended and traced all over the world, in terms of blended in China or India, on the route coming back, they're classified as vegetable oil. Yes, it is a very huge challenge in terms of green labeling this product, whether it's for cosmetic use or for food use or others. However, in SEC, we're actually embarking on a much harder track, which is going upstream at the mills and plantation end, and we're looking at a more pro-business approach in terms of auditing and traceability at that end first. I think it has to start at the root cause to look at how we can be responsible. And of course, the middle part, which is now dealt by WWF in terms of their CSPO labeling and traceability under RSPO, that is a fantastic first start. But again, it's only 20% of the entire supply chain. So it's going to be a long haul road for all of us, and huge challenges ahead.
Sorry, for the time limits and the constraint of Mr. Bian's English, I will answer on behalf of Mr. Bian. Here's the thing, the CFNA is actually an affiliated organization of MOFCOM, the China Ministry of Commerce. So it actually can be regarded as a governmental body. And CFNA is also in the position of monitoring and supervise of all the import and business operations of Chinese palm oil. So every enterprises that who have the intentions or already engaged in the industry have to resort to CFNA for the administrative approval. So actually, CFNA, during this whole process, CFNA get a better understanding of this market situations of standing on a more microwave. So under this, just as Mr. Bian mentioned, the FGMC program, and CFNA was the MOFCOM, and the British government has undertake a project named to develop a guide. It's a guide mainly over objective is to lay a structure or guide that the Chinese domestic enterprises who have the intentions for the palm oil investment overseas. And some leading enterprises like Julong, totally local enterprises, already taken their step to invest in their palm oil plantation in the Kalimantan, Indonesia, and Mr. Bian has led a team just visited there before. So we do believe that for China, because for Chinese current economic situation, it's the concept of sustainability is by no means an economic driver. So the sustainability for the Western countries may be a buzzword, but for Chinese it's like more foreign or is kind of related to costly. So we really want to this. Ms. Bian want me to express his intention is that the greening process of sustainability palm oil may be a long-term process. It's have to carry out step by step. And CFNA is actively play his role in helping and encouraging and advocate the concept of sustainability to all the stakeholders and every member of CFNA. CFNA has 8,000 members, actually basically cover every aspect and product of all the agriculture products. So we really have the belief, and we really have, I do believe we really have the confidence that a greening, though it will take a longer time for China to see, but according to statistics, official statistics, that by the year 2020, there will accorded 20 million Chinese people can be regarded as the middle class in China. So the rich Chinese people means they are willingness to strive for the commodities or agricultural products that offered by the enterprises who are willing to play an active role and active impact on the social or environmental friendly way. So CFNA is willing to jointly work together with the think tankers or the regional organizations like SIAs to work together for a bright future for the developing of Chinese sustainable palm oil. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question in Mandarin actually here about whether or not we can see within the next 10 years a chance of reducing the use of such palm oil in terms of imports into China to reach this idea of a sustainable world. But I think you've touched on some of those ideas there already. I'll move on to Mr. Gurmit Singh, who has been patiently waiting there, quite out of character. Gurmit, on the back, please.
Gurmit Singh from Saddam, Malaysia. Let me first start by saying it's economically stupid at the current situation to produce biofuel from palm oil with the current prices of oil, right? That was something I told the Minister of Palm Industry 15, 20 years ago. But coming back to the two issues that I want to ask. One is, why is palm oil grown so extensively on peat soil? Is it because peat soil is comparatively cheaper than normal other land? Or is there a scientific argument for growing palm oil and peat soil? That is something that has been bugging me and nobody has given me a good explanation. Perhaps the gentleman from the association may want to offer a scientific explanation. The other issue, in a way, has partly been addressed, is the fact that China has been seen as a black hole as far as sustainability is concerned. Because a lot of timber from Sarawak is ending up in China because they don't care about sustainability, whereas it's difficult to meet sustainability standards to export to EU, for example. Same thing for palm oil. So the question is, how serious and extensively are sustainability certification going to be the criteria for imports to China from now onwards?
Are there any questions from the floor? Anybody else want to ask a question? Okay, question number 2 over there. Let's take one more question from over there, please.
Hello, I'm Rosdiana from the Responsible Sustainable Palm Oil of Indonesia. I was the Executive Director of Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil for 12 years. You know, I heard the discussion carefully, although I do not listen to all of you because I was not here. But I think we have to be very careful when we talk about sustainability, when we talk about sustainable palm oil. This sustainable problem actually come out since the year of 2000. They discuss in WTO and they discuss in many other organizations. But there is no such a official definition about it. So when we are talking about sustainability, we all have to be committed to sustainable. Not only palm oil, everything is supposed to be sustainable. But when we produce sustainable palm oil, we have to make sure that people are buying it. But when I went to Europe last year, Germany is only by 3%, and only for biofuel. Netherlands said, we are going to buy it. And the UK said, we are still thinking to buy it. So who is going to buy it? You know, you have to think about it. Singapore is a very small country. If the Indonesian use 35% of biodiesel for ourselves, much more consumption is Indonesia compared to Europe, you see.
Could I trouble you for a question, please?
Ready?
Could I trouble you for your question?
Yeah, I'm going to it. But no, I stop here.
Oh, thank you. Any more questions from the floor, please? One gentleman here. We'll take this one before we return to the panel.
Thank you. This is Chris from PMHS. So my question is about illegal palm oil. Recently, there's a report by Eyes on the Forest regarding some big palm oil companies who may even own mills that source illegal palm oil, which are grown in conservation land, moratorium land. So what are the solutions to tackle this problem? Especially like IPO, there's only 20% sustainable palm oil, but how do we address the remaining 80% of uncertified palm oil, and especially some of them could be illegal? Thank you.
Okay, so if I can broadly classify our questions, we have a question about why palm oil is grown so much on peatland. There's a bit more of a technical issue. And a second question about China's perception when it comes to sustainability. And in fact, I had a question on the conference app as well about the general perception of China in relation to sustainability. I know we've heard a bit about what CFNA does, but maybe more broadly for the country as a whole, what potential lies there for correcting that? This issue of the definition of sustainability, I think that was something that Dr. Makhdzir, you also touched on, and maybe I'll open it up to perhaps Petra or Ms. Low to talk about this issue of sustainability and what is the most effective and useful definition for us to look at, and that's crucial as well. And then the last question was on big companies using illegally farmed palm oil as well. So for the first question on why palm oil is grown so much on peatland, Dr. Makhdzir, would you like to?
I wouldn't want to say planting palm oil in peat soil is stupid, because it happened long before we start grumbling about the forest fires and all that. So it has been there for a long while. You see, the first seed from palm oil comes to Malaysia in 1871-72 during Frank Zhenhu. And the first estate plantation was grown in 1919. And by 2019 will be 150 years of palm oil history. And it has a lot of history in that. And the planting of palm oil in peat has started long before we started discussing about this. Of course, now we realize some of the problem. And in fact, for Malaysia itself, I want to tell you that we are almost reaching our commitment to 50% forest cover on the ground. I do not see any more expansion on a new green fields. So, but research is being done. We have here, I think Luli Melling is here. Luli, are you here? Yes, she's doing research a lot on peat. So it has been grown for a long while, and there are many types of peat, cypric, fibric, and I forgot the other one. And there are those certain peat that is not suitable. What I'm saying is that a lot of the information is, we cannot fight it with gut feelings. We have to have the hard cold facts to dictate our decision. And some of it has been grown. That doesn't mean we are going to expand on peat. No, we are not. And in the issue of sustainability, I really salute Ibu Rosdiana for all the efforts that she has done on the ISPO. She's commendable on that. Yes, we should be cautious. Now, what is being imposed on sustainability records is on palm oil. Why not on soybean? Why not on canola? Why not on sunflower? Why not on that? And I think the moment the traceability system is by mass balance now, it's up to at the mill level. After that, you cannot trace. Very difficult for you to see, unless you have a barcode nanotechnology, chemical markers to do that. But I think the advances in genomics now, editing DNA control, I think what we see in future, the expansion and production in palm oil is more on the R&D rather than land expansion. That's the way I look at it.
Thank you. Turn out to
like speak in Chinese.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
同意刚才这位先生的意见。同时，我们始终认为，实现这个棕榈油，包括棕榈油在内的可持续发展的这样一个目标，需要这个供方、需方 twice sides 共同努力。第二，在整个产业链当中，每一个环节都有它相应的责任。我们作为一家这个公共性的行业组织啊，愿意和又处在中国这样一个进口量比较大的、持续将要增长的这样一个市场里面，我们愿意和相关的各个环节保持密切的沟通，共同实现这样一个好的愿景。Thank you.
I do believe that in the progress of maintaining and achieving the objective of sustainable or the greening the progress of the palm oil supply chain, that it has to be pushed by both ends, from the supplier and both importers. So the China will see a steady and increasing demand on palm oil, because palm oil is quite important in Chinese vegetable oils. And so CFNA is actually play a very leading role and important role in the whole process. So the CFNA would love to work with the think tankers like SIA and other regional organizations for the pushing this, the realization of this objective.
Thank you. I'd like to go now to the question about maybe the use of illegally farmed palm oil and how much of a concern. Dr. Petra as well, and then pull in Hervé, and then maybe Isabella for the last comment.
I think I want to interlink it a bit. One is indeed the legal, illegal status of FFB, as well as I think the other question that we were on in terms of, when is it enough for palm, how much do we need more? I think it is a general question of land use planning now. We're not sitting anymore in the era of saying a particular crop has had enough or a particular population is growing in one particular country. I think overall, we saw, it links back to the Paris discussion on where do we stand with the climate, what needs to happen within that perspective, but it also means that the social context nowadays is a part that you need to integrate with that. And coming back to that report that just came out, Eyes on the Forest, I was interviewed, I was asked for my response. I saw that there was only one liner that came out of that response. But I clearly said in my reply, yes, it is an issue. Yes, it is a concern. If you look at the fact that you protect the forest, you need to protect it. But you also nowadays, it is the environmental context that we have to deal with, but not to forget the social context as well. And encroachment needs to stop, yeah. But it also means that we have to take into account the overall human context as well. We can't stay away from saying one is not going hand in hand with the other. So in that sense, I think sitting around the table again and say what needs to happen if we do have a gazetted national park and with the population that is sitting in there, what is happening on the encroachment, and where does that then needs to be addressed, how can we address it, what needs to be happening in that space. I think if you create, in such a situation, if you let's say that you would not buy at all anymore from the whole area, what sort of social situation are you allowing to occur as well? And I think you can't do that without also sitting around a table with the local governments to discuss what kind of context you then are creating. So I think that is a bit my sort of reflection on it, that you do need to take into account a social element there that you need to address as well. And that goes beyond only palm companies, it goes actually to a wider extent. So that was one. I think the other one was around sustainability definitions. Did you want me to?
I think we'll
yeah?
address
Okay.
that as well. Maybe very quickly, I'll turn to Hervé for some closing comments and on any of the questions that we've addressed so far.
You were speaking about illegal palm oil, but there is also the issue I heard about some companies which are mixing, in fact, sustainable palm oil and non-palm oil and supply like sustainable palm oil. For us, it's an issue because as a small company, when you are doing less than 200 metric tons, you are not going to send somebody of your company to audit. So in fact, there is one solution for us is to really rely on the reputation of the company. So for instance, for our factory in Taiping, we choose to work with Unitata, which is a supplier which is doing only 100% sustainable palm oil, and which is only working with parent companies. So like that, we feel assured that we will have a legal and really 100% segregated certified palm oil. So there is also the fact that a company have reputation, so you can choose your supplier. And even if you are a small buyer, you can choose to work with somebody which is reputable.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Low, maybe very quickly, some closing comments.
I know, I'm the last one. I think it goes like this. I think I want to answer Ibu's question. What is the meaning of sustainability? To a layman, it goes like this. Don't borrow our future's resource and spend it now. So I like the concept of what Makhdzir said in the first session, that we're going to lock down in terms of this is X number of estate we're going to utilize to produce the palm oil. I'd like to hear things coming up from RSPO and MSPO concerning quotas like you do with oil, so that everyone says we are not going to borrow from our future. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this second panel. I think we've covered a very broad range of issues. There's a far broader range of questions that we didn't have time to get through, but that's inevitable when we have a panel of such distinguished and diverse speakers as well. I'd like to thank our speakers who have come from around the world to join us here today, as well as from our neighbors and from Singapore as well. And I'm sure we'll be talking about this issue for many years to come. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.